I'm not fully in frame, but maybe that's for the better. Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to be discussing all the books that I want to reread. These are all books that in my memory I think would make really good rereads, and some of them I have already reread and I can't wait to reread again. The first book that I want to talk about was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Let's see if that actually stays upright. The Hate You Give is about a 16-year-old girl called Star who lives in two worlds, the poor neighborhood where she was born and raised and her posh high school in the suburbs. The uneasy balance between them is shattered when Star is the only witness to the fatal shooting of her unarmed best friend Khalil by a police officer. Now what Star says could destroy her community, it could also get her killed. I read The Hate You Give in high school and I instantly loved it. I remember reading through it so fast, talking about it with my friends, and eagerly awaiting the movie adaptation. This book definitely did a lot in terms of making young adults in other places more aware of what was going on in America. It's sad that violence like this based on race isn't unique to America, and I think it's very important for books like this to be read. And I know that writing this story and being an advocate for this was a lot for Angie Thomas as a writer to take on. I can remember wanting to argue in my high school English class that this book would become a modern classic, and I still believe that. I remember it being so good, such a good story, complex characters, and just a really good book. That's one of the books that I really want to reread. The next book on my list is Small Spaces by Sarah Epstein. I think Small Spaces by Sarah Epstein was probably the first young adult Australian book I read. I can remember being chilled by and reading it beside a window at night. I probably shouldn't have done that. It's probably the ideal reading environment for this book, but yeah, maybe don't do that. This book is about a girl called Tash who has been traumatized since childhood when she witnessed her gruesome imaginary friend Sparrow lure young Mallory Fisher away from the carnival. At the time, nobody believed Tash, and she has since come to accept that Sparrow wasn't real. Now 15 and mute, Mallory's never spoken about the week she went missing. As disturbing memories resurface, Tash starts to see Sparrow again, and she realizes Mallory is the key to unlocking the truth about a dark secret connecting them all. Does Sparrow exist after all, or is Tash more dangerous to the others than she thinks? What made me pick it up initially was this little description on it that says, a beautifully crafted psychological thriller, I couldn't put it down. I think the word psychological thriller being in the young adult section made me pick up this book. So as I said, this book is a psychological thriller. It's really spooky, it's really eerie. It's been a couple of years since I read this book, so I want to reread it again and see if it holds up. The next book I want to discuss is one I read at the start of the pandemic with its relatable title of Sourdough. I don't have the description in front of me, but from memory, this is a book about a girl who works as a software engineer and doesn't really like where she works, or she's just going through the motions of the day-to-day until she acquires a magical sourdough starter. She's left it to look after, and from it grows wonderful new opportunities. She starts making heaps of bread, she starts selling it, and I think it's about sort of finding what you enjoy in life and going after those things. It's got a heavy dose of magical realism, and I can remember just relating so much to it and it being the perfect book to read during lockdown. I hear somebody at my door. Let me just check what's going on there. The somebody at the door was in fact my cat, who is now sniffing the camera. I'm really hoping she doesn't knock it over. So yes, Sourdough, really good book. I really want to reread it and I want to get it physically. I was low-key hoping I would find it in a secondhand bookstore, but I haven't found it yet. So I might just buy it at some point. The fourth book on my list is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. Let me see if I can get to it without disturbing her. Putting that there. And putting this. Yeah. A Darker Shade of Magic is the first book in a trilogy. This trilogy follows a character called Kel, who has a mysterious cloak, as the first line tells you, and is able to traverse between 3 or 4 different alternate Londons. Red, black, white, and grey. When I first read this book and the entire trilogy, I read it through the library as ebooks, and I loved it so much that, as you can see, I bought the collector's edition. This book has beautiful end papers, it's hardback, it's got a ribbon, it is the quality I usually don't find in Australian stores. You guys with Barnes & Noble are so lucky. And I know I'm saying that as somebody who can buy physical books because it's not a completely insane price, at least yet. So as I was saying, I really love this series. I want to reread it before reading The Fragile Threads of Power. I'm so interested by the magic system. I definitely want to reread it, and I suspect it is quite rereadable. The next book on my list was another book I read through the library, which is called A Song Below Water. From my memory, this is a book that deals with racial discrimination, harassment, racism in America, with this added layer of the main character being a siren. And sirens in this place are persecuted and not liked and maybe even killed. I'm not describing it very well, but it was a really good book. It's set in high school, teenagers. You've got the usual things like bullying and whatnot, then you've got this added secret that the main character is hiding. And yeah, I really want to reread it, see if it's as enjoyable as I remember it was. The next book on my list is another Australian young adult book, and that is The Gaps by Leanne Hall. The Gaps kicks off with the main character Chloe seeing that Yin Mitchell, another 16-year-old in her year level at school, has been kidnapped. This news reverberates throughout the year level, and all the girls at this all-girls prestigious school have to band together and cope in the ways that teenage girls would. As the description says, as the hours tick by, the girls know the chance of Yin being found alive is becoming smaller and smaller. Everyone is affected by Yin's disappearance. Even scholarship student Chloe, who usually stays out of drama, is drawn into the maelstrom. And when she begins to form an alliance with Natalia, the queen bee of year 10, things get even more complicated. I think the key things I remember in this book was just how well paced it was, because there's this mystery about what happened to this girl, where is she, what's going on, at the center of the story. But as well as this, you've got this really interesting exploration of how everybody left behind deals with this. For example, they start sending these chain emails with tips about like what to do if you're in that situation, how to stay safe. They start accusing people, and different people start sort of grieving more prominently than others. There are characters in this book who were friends with this girl in the past but no longer are, and they don't know how to feel about it. They don't know how they are supposed to physically show how they feel about this. And ultimately it's a story about friendship, banding together, strength, vulnerability, and all in a young adult novel. The next book on my list is one of my all-time favorite books, and probably my comfort reread, and that is Social Q by Keika. Social Q is about high school graduate Zoe Kelly, who's starting a new job as an intern at a communications and media type company. Think something like BuzzFeed. It's the first step on the road to her dream writing career, and she is ready to reinvent herself. And a big part about this book is that Zoe has autism, so she's used to not interpreting the world in the same way as other people and having to fit into the boxes other people have designed. As part of this, she doesn't think that anyone's ever had a crush on her, and she writes a piece about that and about how she's been experimenting with online dating. This piece goes viral, and it turns out, no, she's actually had people who have had crushes on her. There's 5 of them, and throughout the course of this book, she gets in contact with all of them, goes on dates with them, and starts to explore this new realm in her life. So it's a funny and heartwarming story, and it reminds me a lot of the movie of To All the Boys I Loved Before. I highly recommend reading it. Also, isn't the cover just adorable? I love it. The next book on this list is the only non-fiction book I'll be discussing, and it is The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. I do find it a little bit ironic how glowy this book is right now. This book is mimicked after how Lee Strobel came to faith by using his journalist skills from his days working in criminal courts to analyze the life and the credibility of Jesus. He looks into fields like history, archaeology, manuscript studies, all that kind of evidence. He looks at the character evidence of both Jesus and people around him. He looks at the non-Christian resources at the time, and it's all written in this really easy to read and enjoyable style. In each chapter, he goes and he interviews scholars in these fields and hears what they say and really probes them with questions. I highly recommend this book for anyone, even if you're not Christian. I think it makes for a really interesting read, and I think it's really important for all of us to decide what we believed about Jesus, because he was a real historical figure, and as C.S. Lewis puts it, you either believe he was liar, lunatic, or Lord. So I highly recommend this book, and I can't wait to reread it again. I think it's a great resource. The next book I want to talk about is Every Version of You by Grace Chan. I can't see in the camera if that's like shiny enough, but look, this book is so shiny. Look at this. This is actually one of the first editions. The newer editions I don't think are as shiny, but you can still find first editions around Australia pretty easily. As the back says, in the late 21st century Australia, Tao Yi and her partner Navin spend most of their time inside a hyper-immersive, hyper-consumerist virtual reality called Gaia. They log on, go to work, socialize, and even eat in this digital utopia. Meanwhile, their aging bodies lie suspended in pods inside cramped apartments. Think The Matrix. Across the city, in the abandoned real world, Tao Yi's mother remains stubbornly offline, dwindling away between hospital visits and memories of her earlier life in Malaysia. When a new technology is developed to permanently upload a human brain to Gaia, Tao Yi must decide what is most important, a digital future or an authentic past. Never Let Me Go meets Black Mirror with a dash of Murakami surrealism thrown in. This is speculative literary fiction at its best. And I agree, this is such a good book. I need to reread it because I talk about this book a lot. I am always up to hype it up. I remember reading this and wanting to underline things and just being immersed in Grace Chan's writing. Her background is in short stories, so she writes every chapter with this beautiful precision that short story writers and poets do so well. I love the world building in this, actually. That's something that really stands out to me, and I find so funny because it's set in Melbourne. The real world part is set in Melbourne, and tech has advanced so much, and they're also leaving so many people behind. And I can just remember, I won't give too many of these details in the book, but there's one part that is just so funny because it compares Australia to America, and it talks about something bad going on. The homelessness crisis in Australia is increased because of this new technology, because people can't afford to work in these worlds, and the real world jobs are sort of dwindling. Amongst other societal problems. And there's also climate change, so it's freezing cold at night. And I just remember it saying something about people dying on the street and there being like the civilized way that the Australians deal with it. Meanwhile, the Americans have the equivalent of a dump truck to scoop the people off the road. Don't tell me that's not true though. Is that not what the US would do? No offense to the Americans watching, but like, that's what they do, right? So anyway, I love little details like that, as absolutely horrific as they are, because you can completely see where the basis for them is. So highly recommend this book. Please go read it. Get the ebook. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Our thing for this book was her first time using Rebecca. If you haven't heard of Yellowface, it's a book that follows June, an author, who after the sudden and unexpected and accidental death of another author, Athena, who she has been super jealous of, who is that author who has gotten, you know, the 6 to 7 figure book deals, her books in book boxes, instant movie adaptations, so much critical success. Meanwhile, June has got none of that. When Athena suddenly dies, she steals Athena's unfinished manuscript in a completely different genre to her own. It's about Chinese workers during one of the world wars, and she passes it off as her own. She changes her name a little bit using her middle name, and when people start to believe that she is of Chinese or Asian descent, she doesn't correct them. Basically, this book follows an awful person. This is a dumpster fire to read, because you just know she's making all these horrible mistakes, but also you see so much of the realism in her and the characters around her, like they're not all perfect. Yeah, overall, this is just a really fun book to read. I think I read it in one day, and I can't wait to speed through it again one day and reread it. The next book on my list is The Final Empire, or Mistborn, which is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy. So this is a book by Brandon Sanderson. If you haven't heard of him and you've been living under a rock, he's a super popular fantasy author. This book is highly acclaimed, and for very good reason. It's not a book I think I'm going to reread soon, especially since I'm still reading The Hero of Ages, which is book 3, but I'll just read you the back because that'll be better than anything I can describe it as. The mists rule the night. The Lord Ruler owns the world. For 1,000 years the ash fell. For 1,000 years the scar slaved in misery and lived in fear. For 1,000 years the Lord Ruler reigned with absolute power and ultimate terror, divinely invincible. Every attempted revolt has failed miserably, yet somehow hope survives. A new kind of uprising is being planned, one that depends on the cunning of a brilliant criminal mastermind and the courage of an unlikely heroine, a Scar Street urchin, who must learn to master allomancy, the power of a Mistborn. What if the prophesied hero had failed to defeat the Dark Lord? The answer will be found in the Mistborn trilogy, a saga of surprises that begins here. Structurally, reading it as a writer and looking at the plot and the characters, it's practically a perfect book. Anyway, I can't wait to reread it one day to look at how it set up this trilogy, how it introduced me to this world. The next book on my list is Completely Normal and Other Lies by Biffy James. This was my favorite YA read of last year, and I actually reread it quite recently. The synopsis on the back of this book I honestly don't think does it complete justice for the vibes and the themes and why I love it so much. The back says, love has rules, so does grief, and Stella Wilde is about to break them all. Stella Wilde is secretly in love with Isaac. He already has a girlfriend, the gorgeous Grace, but he seems to love Stella back. He even promises Stella he'll break up with Grace, but then Isaac is killed in a car accident, and Stella is left wondering who Isaac really had feelings for. So when Stella and Grace unexpectedly become friends, Stella hides the fact that she and Isaac were together. After all, being friends with Grace, at least until the truth comes out, is completely normal, isn't it? I think what really stands out to me about this book is the portrayal of the female friendships and female characters. I never know how to start talking about this book because there are so many different aspects of it that I love. I think you could write 5 whole different high school essays on this story. I'll just choose like 2. I love how it talks about female friendships in high school. Stella, she's got her friends from when she was younger and she doesn't get along with them anymore, but because there's no precedent on how to break up with friends you've had forever, she doesn't, and she puts up with these snide comments they make about her and other people and how she has nothing in common with them anymore. She doesn't really want to be their friend, but she's got no other options and she'd rather not be a loner, so she deals with it. And then she becomes friends with Grace, which is like problematic for like, you know, the whole like being quite good friends / unofficial boyfriend girlfriend or whatever their relationship was with Isaac, her boyfriend. Their friendship is so much more honest and they're able to relax and they get each other, right? And then another part I love in the writing is how every character feels so 3D. I know we say that a lot about books, but truly, particularly Grace, who you're watching through Stella's perspective, there are scenes where you can see she's holding things back from Stella or she's acting differently around her parents, because of course everyone has sort of like a different personality when you're around different people. Biffy's managed to capture all of that in this book. Highly recommend this book. I can't wait to reread it again someday, and I hope you'll read it too. The second last book on my list is Does My Head Look Big in This? Why can I not pronounce that? The second last book on my list is Does My Head Look Big in This by Randa Abdel Fattah. Just want you to know that I mispronounced that like 5 times. The title, grade 3 English, you know. It's that point in the filming. This book is so funny. It is set in 2002 Australia. It's about a girl, Amal, who decides to start wearing the hijab. She's 16 years old, Australian, Palestinian, Muslim, still getting to grips with her various identity hyphens. You know, it's hard enough being a teenager, but add on to that when she starts wearing the hijab at a Catholic school. Luckily, she's got supportive friends who all have their own troubles that they are themselves dealing with. My highlights for this book is that it is super funny. It's really witty. It's got a lot of one-liners. The writing style is honestly the type of style I think I find myself trying to emulate. And I really love seeing 2002 Australia. There are so many details in this. Like, she goes to the school library to listen to music, but she puts headphones on and listens to music. I can remember doing that in stores. I loved all the religious representation in this book. You've got multiple Muslim characters who express their faith in different ways. You've got different families who express their cultures and their faith in different ways. Body image is one of the themes discussed as well. You also have Christian, Catholic, Greek Orthodox, and secular Jewish characters. And I must say, I'll probably say this more in my end of month review because I read this quite recently and already I want to reread it. I feel like a lot of people on the reviews on Goodreads that I read missed this book. Like, they just didn't get it. I have a feeling it was published in the US, and American audiences, when they read it, they just didn't understand it, or they didn't understand the humor or the Australianness of it. And yeah, basically I want more people to read this because I think it is a brilliant book. It is hilarious and I can't wait to reread it. And if you're judging how battered up my copy is, I got it secondhand at the Lifeline Book Fest, which I will link the video to below. Final book I want to talk about before my camera battery dies, because it is blinking at me, is The Great Undoing by Charlene Alsop. I don't have this book physically because I read it quite recently through the library, but I need a physical copy and I can't wait to underline it. I don't even really know how to describe this book other than it is a dystopian speculative story set in the future with different timelines in this one story about past with the main character Scarlett and her family growing up with her father and Indigenous Australian customs, family learning about her Aboriginal heritage. There is a big Indigenous theme in this book, and language is a big theme in this book about truth and history and who writes history and how you can correct history to show all the perspectives. The main character's degree is even in truth telling, so there's this big theme about what is truth. And then there is this present day and then future timeline of the main character. She's living in England, she's working as a truth teller where she's correcting history in text, and she's falling in love, but then something happens in this dystopian world where they sort of have their identities in their blood. It came out of a pandemic worse than the COVID one we've gone through, which isn't that a lovely thought? But then this technology stops working and the world sort of shuts down, there's no communication, and her being stuck in England, she needs to get out quick. And she finds her way out, and she then meets another Australian and tries to flee the country. Overall, I just love the use of language in this book, all the themes it brings up, all these discussions around what is the truth, who decides the truth. I love the speculative element, as you can probably tell. I love speculative stories, and I cannot wait to read more books by Charlene whenever she writes more. I hope she writes more. And I cannot wait to reread this book. I'm also thinking of reading it in order, since you get pieces of the future and the past at the same time, and then it sort of flips into being longer chunks in present day as you piece together what's happened that's gotten her into the situation where she has to flee the country, and what's happened with her family and the history of her family. Overall, it's an amazing read. I really want more people to read it. I think it came out either this year or last year, so it's fairly new. I highly recommend you add it to your TBR. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. If you've read any of these books or you want to read them, please comment down below. If you've made it this far, you might as well subscribe because you've watched this much, so you've probably enjoyed it, or you've double tapped for the whole video, which also I don't blame you for doing that. I probably would do the same thing. Either way, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you're having a good day, and thank you again for watching.